So, good evening, everyone. I'm Bernard Holloway, the co-chair of Rise Prince George's for the Coalition for Smarter Growth. We're really excited to have everyone here tonight to talk about how Prince George's moves forward on transportation in many different ways over the course of the next 9 to 12 months. And we want to both provide you all with a lot of information and background on some amazing initiatives that are going on at the county and state level to advance transportation planning and more multimodal transportation options that are supported for all of our residents on all of our roadways. And in addition to that, we want to be able to highlight as we go through the call, and especially towards the end, a few different ways that you can start to take action to begin to put this transportation vision into reality. We have a really great slate of speakers, some of whom are familiar faces, others of whom are new to the Rise Prince George's family. But I wanted to start by having our County Council Chair for Transportation, Infrastructure, Energy, and the Environment, Eric Olson, come on and deliver a few words, because a lot of this work around the Master Plan for Transportation is a direct outgrowth of his advocacy back in 2023 for the Complete Streets Act. And a lot of what we're talking about in terms of the standards and requirements and infrastructure that are built along with our new roads will ensure that his legislation gets implemented in part through this work that we're continuing to push forward right now. Thanks, Council Chair. Thanks, Chair Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. Appreciate that, and appreciate everybody who's joined us. And yeah, so the Walkable Urban Streets Act. I want to thank everybody who's been on here, and particularly Cheryl and the Coalition for Smarter Growth, and WABA and others who had advocated for that legislation, and we really got that through. And Director Hall, you were very helpful in that as well, and your team. Yeah, it's a piece of legislation that basically says that in our most urban areas, especially around transit centers, that we're going to switch the way things are done. So narrowing streets, narrowing the distances to cross, creating more bikeable, walkable areas, sharpening the corners so that people have to slow down, lowering the speed limits so that people have to slow down, and a host of other best practices from around the country. And we were able to get, the Department of Public Works and Transportation. We worked very closely with them, the county DPWT. And now, those are the regulations, so that when new development comes in, they have to build to that standard. As the county rebuilds roads in our most urban areas, they have to follow those standards. So there's a template now that provides different options to achieve those, depending on the widths of the right of way that are there. And so that's a big victory, and we have to also, all of us need to stay on top of it, so in the future those are implemented and stuck to. But those are the rules now. But that doesn't happen without the advocacy of this community, people who care about the bikeable, walkable urban areas. Of course, we also have a lot of state roads and in Prince George's County that also run through our most urban areas. And we've been working with the State Highway Administration. I know Carm is on, and I see Derek Gunn on as well. They've been great partners in working on the PSAP program. I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but we're really excited about the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan initiative, which is exactly what should be done. And so I'm sure they'll talk more about that. But we got the purple line that's finally coming, and we have to make sure that people can get to and from the light rail safely. So those are a few words. I hope we haven't gone over my time, but Bernard, I appreciate it, and I look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you so much, Councilman Olson, both to you and your team for being really generous with your time and being really generous with your collaboration and engagement with us. That was a really great way to kind of set the stage for our next speaker, which is literally our planning director, Lakisha Hull. I know this might be is this your first time presenting to RISE, Director Hall, or is this your time number 2?
Number 2. I was maybe a couple weeks on the job last year when I got the invitation, so happy to do that.
Without a doubt. Planning Director Hall comes with a lot of experience, from Charlotte to Los Angeles to even her hometown of Miami, where she was the planning director before coming here. I know she has lots of big plans for our large and sprawling planning department, and she decided to engage more deeply with the final rewrite and update of this master plan for transportation. So before we get to talking more about how do we go from vision to implementation, I wanted to give Director Hull a chance to ground us with where we are and some of the steps that need to take both before the planning board and before the council over the next 9 to 12 months to make sure that this master plan for transportation is codified into reality with a lot of community backing. Take it away, Director.
Thank you so much, Bernard. And I'll be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Councilmember Olson, his leadership and his partnership since I started in my role last year. So thank you so much for all that you do, sir. So I'm going to have a quick presentation, and I want to make sure that you guys are up to speed of what's going on with this exciting document. This is probably one of the most attractive documents that I've seen. I know I'm a little partial here, but I want to make sure that I walk through at a high level what is going to be something that's going to set the tone of moving forward multimodal transportation in Prince George's County. So what is Go Prince George's? So Go Prince George's, in very high layman terms, is a functional master plan that implements our general plan. Our general plan was adopted 11 years ago. And so as part of a planning process, we can update functional master plans that tie back to our general plan. So this is considered a master plan for the entire county. It's a single document that combines previously adopted transportation policies and recommendations, and then has a forward-thinking approach for the entire county, including the incorporated areas, except for Laurel. It also enhances implementation tools to support capital improvement projects and development review processes. On the left of the screen is a map of our wonderful county, and it gives you an idea today under our general plan, where we call regional transit districts, where we have local centers, our areas that we have planned or either active or existing metro stations and lines, and also where we have some of our more sensitive agricultural areas. So about the project itself. So it's a plan for the 21st century. The last time we updated our master plan of transportation was 2009. So it's a plan that's 16 years old. We know a lot of things weren't in place 16 years ago. We didn't have rideshare. And so even just how we have moved forward in a lot of ways is now important for us to modernize. So this plan looks at not only moving cars, but moving people, right? It's just really important that we focus more on moving people in very strategic ways. Also establishing policies about moving goods. We know during the pandemic, we saw how goods got moved and services got moved in a very transformative way. So how do we address that? How do we also look at improving and adapting reuse of streets, services, bicycle facilities, and also pedestrian pathways as well? Go Prince George's website. So hopefully everyone has had a chance to go online. The document that we are going to talk about very quickly tonight is online. It's a very, very easy user-friendly document. And so all of our resources, our timelines are posted online. And so we do have hard copies available here at the Commission's Largo headquarters, which is 1616 McCormick Drive in Largo, Maryland. And so feel free also to stop by Monday through Friday to pick up a physical copy. But the goal, like I said, is just to provide objectives and values, really identify the resources and the other supplemental documents. There's a lot of documents, a lot of partners, and then also how do we also make sure the customer and the resident and the consumer can get engaged through our news efforts. So within the document itself, so you'll see in this presentation some of the screenshots from the document. All of the document was done in-house. And so we did hire a consultant firm to help us with some of the information gathering over the last couple of years, but the document was designed in-house, so we're really happy in the product itself. It is a draft document, so it's not final. And so we are open for input and making sure that we have the right information in place before we schedule a joint public hearing next year in 2026. So this gives you an idea of all the agency partners and municipalities that we work with here in Prince George's County. So I mentioned that we have 26 cities out of 27 cities that we do transportation planning for. We also have partners from the National Park Service all the way to CSX. Within the commission, we have a great partnership between the planning department and Park and Recreation. Our Park and Recreation maintains a lot of trails. And so that's the other thing, is that we have the ability to also maximize public right-of-ways and other resources throughout our very diverse county. We also have the ability to work with the different MDOT agencies. And so we're happy to have that partnership as well as local partnerships with our Department of Permitting and Inspection and Enforcement as well. So that just got me an idea of how many people we've been engaging with over the last few years on this document. Community engagement. And so within the document, you'll get a snapshot of where we started. So this process started in 2021. And so keep that in mind. Things were very different in 2021 to where we are now. And so it's been a very, very comprehensive, very thorough process, a lot of different voices over the last few years. And we've been using different methods and connecting with the community. On the right side, I'm happy to say I was outside with a lot of my team members. That's chalk that we can erase off the parking lot. But we're out there also trying to get people really excited about Go Prince George's. The bottom right picture is also a recent picture. We had an open house in March of this year. It was standing room only. We had an afternoon and then an evening open house to also inform the community about the process itself. We also want to make sure that we are bilingual and able to reach different communities as well. So just pretty quickly, so the 2009 approved master plan is the current adopted plan that guides transportation efforts throughout the county. So it was last updated before then in 1982. And so at that time, we only had 34 master and sector plans. So to keep it super simple, master and sector plans are basically guiding documents, blueprints throughout Prince George's County, and some of them had transportation recommendations in them. And so our goal now is to pull all that information together in a way that is easy to follow, whether you're in a rural area or a very TOD, transit-oriented development area. Have a one transportation document versus having so many different policy documents to go to. At the time, you know, we had policies that focused on guide transit, street, road, and highway components throughout the entire county. And then it also talked about how do we look at concurrency and adequacy? How do we look at land use planning? How do we also deal with congestion management? So the document on the left side is the current adopted document for Prince George's County. Update since 2009. So this just gives you an idea of what has happened in the last 16 years. So we've updated our general plan in that time period. We now have 20 more master and sector plans that have been updated since the last revision to the MPOT. We also have a conservation plan. So now we're talking about green infrastructure and sustainability. And then Farmer 2040, which was also adopted in 2013, is our park and recreation master plan that also talks how they plan ahead for open space, recreation, and park needs. And then on top of that, this is a snapshot of all the plans that had transportation policies that were updated in the last 16 years. And so the planning department manages and works very close with council members like Councilmember Olson, others on the county council and district council to update whether it's subregion 1 or subregion 4 or east over Forest Heights. So it's a lot of different great overlays, but we also want to be very sensitive of not having too much to focus on, but that gives you another snapshot of all the documents. Quickly going through some of the other things that we've updated is that we had over 2,500 new transportation and mobility policies that we went through over all those documents that I just referenced. So we're bringing it all together in one comprehensive document. We also want to make sure this new document supersedes anything that predated, you know, the 2035 plan that we have for the counties. We want to make sure that what we have in 2009 is great, but let's make sure we're moving forward. So in regards to the other things that's taken place is that we have more residents that's moved in since 2009. There's a market now to be more walkable, right? Have more investment in transit. We also want to continue to support, you know, leading the state in different type of growth abilities. Also, we also got to keep in mind that even if we're talking about transportation, we have to also consider landscaping, floodplain, other things like stormwater management, the urban street design standards, which was recently updated by DPW&T last year. So how do we also modernize all that within the document and then the policy document as well that's on the right side of the screen? We look at, you know, the draft climate action plan, you know, Vision Zero, We just mentioned the Transit Vision Plan, which is ongoing, and the Better Bus Initiative as well. This is done on purpose to look very busy. So we don't look at transportation in a vacuum, but this just goes to show how many documents that have been updated throughout Prince George's County that we looped into this process. So we saved you guys the interesting ability to go through all of these transportation initiatives, studies, streetscape plans, manuals, wayfinding. And so this has all been considered in part of this update. Also, just to keep in mind, Purple Line is under construction. FBI headquarters selection. I'm sorry, this presentation is not aging too well. But at the time when we created this, we were still entertaining the conversation on how do we provide multimodality for federal sites in Prince George's County. You know, just kind of looking at all the different components of how we're modernizing some areas, and also making sure that we have miles of roads that are considered as part of our subdivision process. So the thing that I love to hit on is that in addition to all the things we talked about in 2009, right? The trails, bikeways, pedestrian mobility, streets, roads, and also just implementing our policies, we now have a term that wasn't that formula or familiar back in the day, micromobility, transportation network companies. This plan also talks about air mobility. We talk about supercommuters, which is a census term that really shows how we're becoming a lot more able to move across the country in a way that creates a connection of communities in a way that we've never had to consider. And then water mobility as well. And so those are some of the things that this plan touches on in addition to what was covered in 2009. Before we started this effort, we did an audit of our conditions report. And so it touched on these topics from CIP and CTP processes, looked at some of the major thoroughfares and roadways, looked at some of the performance measures, and also just touched on system performances as well. So our consultant helped us with that. Just keeping it super high level, these are some of the touching points of what we're doing here. We have one of the most interstate highways, as I-95 is one of the most popular one in the country. We also have the Capitol Beltway that's also pretty popular. So how do we deal with these major road networks and these assets as we're trying to also create communities that are safe to travel through and traverse through as well? Just for your interest, and so these are some quick metrics also that's included in the plan, that, you know, we have one-seat transit rides to various points of interest, from higher education institutions to going down to different parts of the DMV. We also have, you know, a series of MARC stations. I was able to take Amtrak this past weekend to travel versus having to drive or take an airplane. So this just goes to show how we're really starting to interconnect a little bit better throughout the county. Once again, we have walkways and bikeways, and so our plan touches at a very high level, and we try to have maps. And so the goal is just to be very conceptual with this, but it kind of shows the area that we're focusing on, whether they're in the district and transit areas, or they're more in the suburban areas of how that's starting to map out, similar to 2009. And what areas are really walkable and what areas are we trying to advance to be more walkable? I'm a little biased here, and so I was able to work on an updated transportation plan, not only in Charlotte and in Los Angeles, but also in my hometown, Miami. So on the far right corner, there's some really good transit goodies that we put in that plan before I left that position last year or the year before. But we also looked at the city of Denver. We looked at comparable size jurisdictions. We looked in Texas. I know we have a panelist here that used to do work in Texas. And so we looked at how did they tell the story of how they're moving forward, of course, locally here in DC. So this is a cross-section of what the Urban Street Design Standards was able to start to present. And so visually, we're trying to do better in telling the story of what is it that we're trying to project when it comes to having a very a multimodal transportation network with cross-sections that really are functional. And so this gives you an example of a cross-section that has the different segments, from pedestrians to having planning strips, utilities for streetlights, and so on and so forth, drop-off areas, and safe dimensions for parking and for people to move safely through those spaces. And so on the right corner is a snapshot of the street design standards. And so we're very excited to incorporate this document into the master plan of transportation, keeping in mind all of our street classifications are either from the 2009 plan or they're related to the urban street design standards, which has civil engineered cross sections. We do not introduce any new classifications as part of this process. So what informs the planning decisions, right? So we have different ways that we have pulled together this information. So we use, subject matter experts, best practices. We also really rely heavily on the community. And then we also use our expertise with consultants to put together a very comprehensive document. So this is not done in a vacuum. We also want to make sure that, the areas that we have, more walkable, bike-friendly areas, also have speed limits that are comparable to safe movement through those areas, right? Make sure the density is in the right place. We know housing and transportation is something that we really need to do a better job with. So how do we even bring that better access to our local residents? So within the plan, just moving quickly through it. So we also wanted to present some values, right? How do we prioritize people? How do we create great places? Equity means safe access for all. Prince Georgians come first, and also being sustainable is paramount. So how do we bring together these 5 values in a way that our policy strategies are forward thinking as well? We also have themes. And so we've noticed in other transportation plans that it's really important to put your policies and strategies in buckets of themes. And so you'll notice that in the document as well. We look at safety as a theme, equity as a theme, innovation. The picture there shows a drone. And so how do we even start to create a space for more innovation to occur even after the plan is adopted? How do we look at sustainability? How do we have better partnerships? I shared all the different transportation agencies. So how do we even start to streamline partnerships even more? And then how do we continue to create community of choices throughout Prince George's County by being very intentional in what we do in this plan? And then we have different priorities. How do we start to ensure these great communities are places that we can live, work, play, learn, shop, and recreate? How do we empower people through our connections, right? Placemaking. And so we realize the importance of having spaces that people can get to safely, whether it's getting to their jobs, taking their children to the doctor's appointment, or going to a hospital to visit a loved one. How do we provide those connections in a very intentional way with our modality? And then also, how do we continue to grow and expand our areas that are doing well? So very quickly, these are the focus areas in the plan. We also touch on transportation demand management, technologies, smart infrastructure. How do we start to make sure our right-of-way really is equipped to have the right type of features in place? Also, complete streets where they're appropriate. Looking at even how we can move better through our rural areas. We even looked at equestrian connections or areas where there's different modes that may not be typical. How do we start to respond to that in a safe way throughout our county? Our facility recommendations, and so when you look at the plan itself, there are some charts and tables that show each segment that we're able to recommend a certain type of facility. So just sharing if there's a bike facility or shared use facility. And so this is also related to the adopted master plan. So if you notice in the right corner of the table, you'll see all the plans that we're pulling these recommendations from that's tied to the street classification. So these are already been vetted. And so we just want to make sure if we do continue on that they have the right vehicle lanes or they're able to be adapted to have a different type of facility associated with it. So legislative approval process. So the state requires us to go through a very, very broad process that requires us to do a lot of engagement. And so the great thing about this process is that because we've done so much research prior to getting to a point of publishing the document, we are now able to have very comfortable conversations on the information that we're presenting, able to get real-time feedback, and then also make sure we're briefing not only the cities, but the council members of what we're hearing back from the community. So the goal ideally is to move forward a joint public hearing where we initially said this summer, but we're gonna move it out another 6 months. And so the slide says summer of this year, we're gonna move this out. We're also gonna move out the planning board adoption from this fall to next year. So everything that you see on the slide actually needs to be pushed out 6 months. And so we don't want to rush this at all. So this is real-time feedback about how we're trying to be more intentional with the timelines. If you have signed up on the website, you'll be able to get notifications of all these critical path dates. But the goal is that we don't also want to continue to push this out because we have a plan that we need to get enacted. So with that being said, on this screen, I do have all the social handles. The page that you can go to quickly to get to the plan itself is Go Prince George's. So it's important that you go to the pgplanning.org page and you can follow us on our social media. So with that, That concludes my presentation, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Director Hall. Really appreciate everything that you shared there. While it's going to take several steps and a multi-year process to really put the master plan for transportation into reality and practice, there are several parts of it that we're actually getting started right now. And part of that is just to connect the dots between something that Councilmember Olson said and Director Hall said, is that literally this document and passing this document before the council is a way in which we'll update the development standards that accompany like building new roads when we build new buildings. And so do we have to build it out like a 6-lane divided highway without sidewalks and bike lanes and striping and lighting and safety improvements? Or are we going to make sure that, especially within Interbeltway Prince George's and urban Prince George's, we have the kind of streets that'll make development, like development around the, not the FBI at Greenbelt, but whatever we're going to have at Greenbelt, is going to be something that building the right streetscape, building the right urban aesthetic is going to be the thing that actually is a big part of the leading change of driving development forward. To that end, I wanted to say thank you to Director Hall and switch from the county level to the state level and see if Carm Saimbre could jump in and give us an update. And my apologies, Carm, if I got your last name a little wrong. But I was hoping that you might be able to share with us all the amazing things that MDOT's working on right now. I was just on the website and noticed that you all are having like a summer of action. And I think it's in part a way to kickstart some of the pedestrian safety and complete streets work that you are trying to do all over the place. And so with that little bit of a tease, I'll pass it over to you, Carm, because I don't want to steal too much of your thunder.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bernard. And thank you to Rise Prince George's and to CSG for the invitation to kind of come back and provide a bit of an update as to what's been happening at the state level regarding complete streets and the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, or the PSAP. So as Bernard mentioned, my name is Carm Saimbre. I'm the Community Relations Manager for Prince George's County at SHA's District 3 office, which covers Prince George's County and Montgomery County. Just to kind of set some context before I jump into some of the more current updates, last summer, the month after MDOT announced that we had adopted the Complete Streets policy, myself and Candice Holford, who is the Director of Active Transportation and Micromobility at MDOT at the Secretary's office, we came before you guys, and Candice spoke a little bit about the broader picture about what the Complete Streets policy means and how it will kind of define and influence projects moving forward that MDOT kind of moves through design and then through construction. And then what I did is I spoke a little bit more to the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan and some of the projects that are currently in development. At that time, we had Cohort 1, and we were getting ready to pursue public outreach for Cohort 1. And I have some updates to share with you all about round 2 of those projects as well. So actually, a year ago tomorrow is when MDOT came out and announced that we had adopted the Complete Streets policy, which is new and department-wide, so it affects all of MDOT's modes, so not just SHA, the ports, the transit authority, the toll roads, the airport authority as well, and MVA. And so the policy, big picture, the goal is to make roads safer by requiring additions of safety features, such as, but not limited to, bike lanes, pedestrian crossings as well, and to prioritize making travel accessible and sustainable for all modes. So the priority isn't just moving cars, but we're shifting the focus to moving pedestrians as well. All of this work is data-driven, and so we're leaning really heavily into using data as we did before, but data around our safety kind of inform what projects should be the priorities. So what should move forward for round 1 of the projects, what should move forward for round 2. And then that data also helps us to inform what countermeasures that we use. And in the context-driven toolkit, which is kind of part of this whole Complete Streets policy initiative, there are 23 different countermeasures that each of the pedestrian safety action plans will sort of implement. And all of those countermeasures, the engineers and the designers kind of take a look at the countermeasures to see which countermeasures are appropriate to apply in the different contexts for each of the projects. The projects are all over the state, but tonight I'll just focus on the PSAP projects that are in Prince George's County. So first, I want to start with Maryland 650. This project actually spans both Montgomery County and Prince George's County, but a little bit of the project is in Prince George's County. So I want to provide an update on this one because this one is the first PSAP project, if you will. It's leading the way. And we have a very exciting update. This project is actually anticipated to start construction this summer. So folks will start to see activities kind of pick up there regarding that particular project. And a key element of the PSAP projects is that unlike our capital improvement projects, which are lengthy and sometimes require right-of-way acquisitions, utility relocations, the PSAPs are meant to be shorter in length. So we don't have those types of right-of-way impacts that would prolong a project, right? When it comes to takes and when it comes to maybe undergrounding utilities, these PSAP projects are meant to be delivered quickly and more responsive compared to some of our larger, more traditional capital improvement projects. But we're not cutting corners when it comes to these projects. The projects are meant to look at the data, see what the issues are, develop countermeasures, and then put them in place. So that's the first update regarding the Maryland 650 project. The Maryland 410 PSAP project, that project is at about a 30% design milestone. We're aiming to advertise this project next fall, meaning that construction would then start the following spring. So that project is about 30% of the way there. And this one runs through the city of Hydesville as well. So this one will kind of, we know there are a lot of eyes on this particular project as well. And I'll make sure to provide Cheryl with all of the links and information to all of the project pages for these projects, as well as information regarding MDOT's Complete Streets policy, the PSAP project, for you policy wonks out there, if you really want to dive into the different countermeasures that we have and see how we kind of came to develop those, I'll make sure to provide Cheryl with that information as well. Moving to another PSAP project, I'll focus on the projects that are here in round 2, and then I'll kind of come back to our district safety projects, which are under the PSAP umbrella, but they were under development before the PSAP kind of came along. But they still are very much have PSAP-like elements to them. So the projects that I'll focus on now are in cohort 2, and those are the projects on Maryland 214 and Maryland 201 as well. So SHA met with the public last fall to kind of bring these projects to the public to say, hey, this is what we're looking at, focusing on these are the areas, these are the corridors. And design is currently underway for those projects. We're currently evaluating the countermeasures. Like I mentioned, there are 23 of them. And we're using the evaluations as well as engineering judgment to develop concepts. At the earliest, we're looking to possibly go back to the public this fall to kind of show what those proposed improvements are. But that's at the earliest. That could possibly be pushed back into early 2026 as well. The contact information for the 201 project and for the Maryland 214 project, she's actually at our Office of Preliminary Planning and, our Office of Preliminary and it's called OPP&E, but the actual acronym is escaping me right now. But I can provide that contact information. She's the project manager for 201 and for 214. So if folks have any questions, any feedback, you're more than welcome to reach out to her or to myself. We want to hear feedback about the kind of concepts that we have out there or what's currently available on the project pages as well, to make sure that we're incorporating this into the project, and so that we're delivering projects that meet the needs of the community and that will hopefully improve and increase safety on all of the state corridors throughout Prince George's County. So that's all that I have in terms of a presentation.
Thank you so much, Carm. I'm going to try to use this as a moment to step in and also step back. I know that we had one comment in the chat from Amara Crooms, and I was hoping this might be something that a combination of Carm and Director Hull could speak to. But Amara was just kind of asking, how will a lot of these changes, both at the MDOT level and separately as the county's master plan of transportation goes into effect, how will this affect building out our street grid, especially in the places that are closest to transit and closest to activity centers, but don't really have all the infrastructure that we need?
So I'll start the answer to the question. So there's different tools in the toolbox. So the great thing about a plan is that you can have different partners to implement it. So we have, of course, government agencies that put aside funding through their budgets to say, these are the projects we're going to prioritize. Then we have what we call development review, which is codified processes that says if you develop your private property and you hit a certain threshold, you will be required to update certain facilities. And so this plan is going to help to influence our zoning code and also our subdivision regulations to say, you have to update these areas because now we have a plan that says we need more protected bike lanes here, or we have a plan that says we need more connectivity from our parks to another places of interest. So that's kind of how this plan is going to connect, is the private developers and the government agencies will work together with nonprofits to implement this plan.
Thank you, Director Hall. And just to kind of add on to that, what Director Hall said was exactly right, right? Now that we have these kind of standards and stated goals that say that, for projects that kind of will come into design or come online after we've implemented these policies, there'll be certain standards that they will have to meet, right? So some of these changes won't be immediate, right? It's going to take a while to kind of go back and like not right size projects per se, but to also get the folks who are designing the projects trained on, well, what does complete streets mean, right? Like, what does that mean for SHA? What does that mean for the other modes that are within MDOT? So it's going to take time for these kind of the complete streets mindset, if you will, to kind of infiltrate into the agency and into the folks who are actually doing the production work to bring the projects online. But the work, it may be slow and it may be tedious, but it is really, really rewarding work and necessary work, right? The work to do the kind of culture shift, if you will, and how you do the work and how you bring a project online and kind of what boxes you can check really quickly, and what used to meet the threshold as, okay, well, this is a project that delivers both safety, mobility, and accessibility, will look different now under the definition that is provided by the Complete Streets policy. So hopefully that answers your question.
It totally does. And like, I think one of the things that I really want to make clear for everybody that's on the call is I know there's going to be a lot of us talking at you, but we really hope that at the end of this call, there are going to be several moments for you to engage and provide feedback to all of these agency leaders and to like their broader efforts. And more specifically with what Carm was saying is something that MDOT's working on right now. So the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan is something that like I've seen come alive during the first 2 years of the Moore administration as a new effort by the State Transportation Agency to prioritize these issues. And I think at every step along the way, they've been really thoughtful and sensitive and dexterous in trying to listen to like all roadway users and to like take their feedback into consideration, not just the data, but people's lived experience of what's happening, which is one of the reasons there's talk about maybe trying to have some equity with some of our Purple Line station buildouts, which is something that one of our steering committee members, Dan Barron, has brought a lot of attention to. So I want people to know that when Carm and Director Hall and Councilman Olson say, come give us feedback, they mean it, because literally the things that we share about our lived experiences, like navigating all of our streets in Prince George's without cars, and our direct interaction as a customer can sometimes be the hidden insight or unknown that somebody sitting in an agency chair needs in order to move service forward. Any other questions? I just like, before we get to kind of like our main speaker, I just wanted to give Ms. Davis her due. So I wanted to kind of clear the floor before we got there. Okay, and taking silence as assent, I'm gonna move forward and just I'm gonna actually do a tag team here. I just wanted to like, by way of background, let everybody know that since we were talking about the importance of transportation and not just the work that needs to happen on the master plan of transportation over the course of this coming fiscal year, but also all of our continued work with MDOT and being a partner and some work that we're gonna share that some homework that we're gonna need you to do tonight, which is to actually offer some feedback to our Department of Public Works and Transportation on the implementation of their transit vision plan. We have lots of things going on when it comes to transportation. And so we thought it would be really important to bring a noted outside expert in all of these things, an engineer, an agency leader, and someone who has become an active influencer and thought leader on multimodal transportation. Veronica O is a former Baltimore City Department of Transportation staffer who has just left being the director of the Houston
Now, Bernard, let me do my own introduction. I appreciate you. Bless your heart.
No,
So
well, I just wanted to get that one thing right. My apologies. My
no.
apologies.
Let me do it. So good evening, everyone. So Veronica Davis. I'm actually originally from New Jersey, and the first place I lived as an adult was Prince George's County. I'm a very proud University of Maryland alum, and currently, I am the National Practice Director for Planning and Environment at Atkins Realis. Our company is the engineers for the Purple Line. So it's full circle for me, having been at University of Maryland when Governor Paris Glendening was first talking about Purple Line, to stand on campus 2 months ago and see it. Transportation takes so long. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that in my presentation of how we can move a little faster, because it's a lot of great ideas being shared, but we got to get it done. That's the key. And so with that, I am the author of Inclusive Transportation, a manifesto for repairing divided communities. I hope that you all can see my screen. I have my email. I'm not really on Twitter anymore, but my socials are at Veronica O Davis for Instagram, Blue Sky, Thread, although I'm not on there too much. And my personal website is veronicao.com. And I just will give a thumbs up from my fellow panelists that you all can see my screen. Okay. Yes, thumbs up. All right, sweet. So let's get it rock and rolling. So this is one thing that explains why I do what I do. This is a ghost bike for those of you that haven't seen one before. And traditionally it is put up where a cyclist has been struck and killed on our roadways. This one in particular is a friend of mine who was struck and killed April 19th, 2019 in Washington, D.C. And often we talk about fatalities in terms of numbers, but it's really about people. And so I'm wearing my Streets for People t-shirt right now. Every fatality is a person that's not going home to their family, their friends, their coworkers. You have your first responders and the trauma that they receive every time they have to go to a scene and manage, a traffic crash. And so it's the thing that drives me. Even as Bernard was trying to get my title right, previously I was the Director of Transportation and Drainage Operations for the City of Houston. And that was the thing that guided a lot of my decision making, whether popular or unpopular. So in my book, I talk about some key stakeholders, and I know Director Hull was talking about all the stakeholders involved in the Go Prince George's plan. But I talk about four key stakeholders. So we have people in power. That's many of us on this panel today, whether we are decision makers or people who are influencing decision makers or providing the data to decision makers. And so we have a lot of power and influence, and that even includes the consulting community. We get paid to advise and to consult and to help guide you all as you look forward. We have the champions and naysayers, and I got a real big place in my heart for Coalition for Smarter Growth. And I know that the champions and the naysayers don't like to be grouped together, but those are the people that if we know we have a public meeting, we know exactly who's showing up. I know that for many of us, you do this work long enough, you can start saying, oh, the person had red hair and glasses. Oh, I know exactly who that was, right? Like you don't even have to have the name of communities. I see Mr. Chair is laughing. And it's in those naysayers and champions have power and influence and have an understanding of how the system works. But in that, we have the silently suffering. And those are the people that really have low influence, low power. They're not coming to your little meeting. And it's not that it's not important to them, but it's people who are just trying to get through the next 24 hours. And then the next 24 hours after that. And then the next 24 hours after that. And often they are left out of the conversation. And so in my book, I talk about this of how do we actually center them. And sometimes that may, make our champions and our naysayers upset, but sometimes we really need to center those silently suffering. And so some examples from my travels around. So this is Tucson, Arizona. This is a street, not like anything you can't find in gorgeous Prince George's. Wide road, many lanes, and a school bus stopping. And so when I think about the silently suffering, the fact that children are getting off of a school bus on a road that's 40 miles per hour, but we know they're probably going 50, 60 miles per hour. And how are we centering them in our decisions versus always trying to just move traffic and move cars and vehicles? And so that's a person standing there waiting for the bus. This is Houston. So as I just told y'all, I was the director of Houston. And before y'all come from my neck in the comments, in the city of Houston, sidewalks are the responsibility of the abutting property owner to install and maintain. So at the foundation of the city of Houston, you have an inequity because installing sidewalks are expensive, particularly many Black and brown communities, many low-income communities have what you see here where this person is in a wheelchair. It's the open ditch system. And I know there's open ditch systems around the county as well. And so there's always this balance of, well, how do we manage mobility with also the fact that there's the sensitivity around the drainage. So one of the things we did do at the City of Houston is a resilient sidewalk program, but to the point of the silently suffering, while we're fighting over who should maintain the sidewalks, who should install the sidewalks, you have a person in the wheelchair that has to move through the middle of the street in order to get to the bus stop. And then you, in the background, you see a person walking with a child to get to a bus stop. And this is what I mean by the silently suffering. And these are your friends. I didn't want to pick on Prince George's, so I picked on Montgomery County. And this is in Rockville, Maryland, not like many other streets that we do see in Prince George's County. And many people will probably argue this is a complete street. It has a sidewalk. There is transit that operates on this street. But the other thing that we know about a street like this from an industry perspective is I can look at this street, doesn't matter anywhere in this country, and I will tell you that this road has traffic crashes that are leading to deaths and serious injuries. And largely it's because while yes, there might be transit and yes, there might be a sidewalk, and yes, there might be bus stops along the way, people are going to go the path of least resistance. Often these bus stops are in the middle of sidewalks, in the middle of the traffic signals, and nobody's walking a half a mile out of their way to get to the traffic signal, particularly when the bus is only going to come every 30 minutes, every 40 minutes. If I see that bus coming, I'm going to dash right across that road. And often people are struck and killed. You know, even when we have children, I know it was more in Montgomery County where students were struck and killed just waiting at the bus stop. And so again, this is what I mean by the silently suffering of, in this case, we would say, oh, we accommodated them, we can move on, but we haven't. And this is not a safe road. And so where do we go from here? So I want to give you some things to chew on as we go into this next set of Q&A with my panelists. So this is from the City of Houston. So one of the things about projects is we send people through all of these planning processes, and then we're like, and we'll be back in 5 years after we're done the design. And the community's like, but you said it's unsafe, and it's unsafe, so why haven't you fixed it? So this is just an example of some of the things that we did in Houston. We call them quick builds, and it literally is the interim solution. We did this immediately coming off of a design process where we noticed that we were going to put curb bump outs, basically narrow the amount that people had to walk in the crosswalk. We knew that was going to be in the final design. Even though this is showing that there are traffic signals, we actually found that the traffic signals were creating some of the safety issues. So we turned the traffic signals on flash. We installed 4-way stop signs. We use these K71 bollards. They're about $150 a piece. And so with staff time and materials for $20,000, we were able to show what this final intersection is going to look like. So it was something for the community, and we added some art because they wanted to see art, but it was something for the community. And this project went to construction about 18 months later. And it just helped people to understand something was coming, and it improved the safety and allowed us to monitor certain things. Because I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's like this little poor K71 there that we realized, okay, we might have to change the curb radius a little bit. So it also gave us the ability to test without going through a full-blown reconstruction to see how everything was going to operate. This is another example in the city of Houston. I know that there are roads that look like this in Prince George's County. And I know that people are being killed on roads like this in Prince George's County. So this is a road in Houston. This is in the Galton neighborhood. We actually call it Little Ellis Island. So for many immigrants that come into the US and make their way to Houston, they land here. It's well over 100 languages spoken. Many people cannot drive, and they're really transit dependent and bike dependent. And the community came to us and said, fix it. Do something and fix it. And so we worked with the community. We came up with the design. The other piece that the community said is that they wanted art. They wanted public art. And we're like, okay, we got you. So this is the project today, where we reduced the number of lanes, reduced the width of the lanes. We added in a concrete protected bike lane. I'm gonna tell you right now, in Texas, everything is bigger, including the vehicles. My design vehicle was a Ford F-150 Texas Edition, which is bigger than a standard Ford F-150. And so we had to do concrete because nothing else was gonna work. So really getting that space and that buffer for people that are in the bike lane. The art was added by an artist selected by the community. And if you see, yes, it stops. But part of that is to get a Reconnecting Communities grant that the city received, because just to the north of this picture is a Texas Department of Transportation facility, and we didn't have permission to get across their facility. So there is a study to do of reconnecting community so that this will then connect this community to the transit facility. Another example, this is in 3rd Ward in Houston, Texas, largely Black, low-income community. The top photo shows what it looked like before. In Houston, it is a very flat, and it doesn't take a lot for it to flood. If you actually Google City of Houston flood and yesterday's date, you will see that underpass is flooded because they got 3 inches of rain in an hour. Doesn't take a lot for the city to flood. And so in this neighborhood, you have people that do not have a vehicle and they need to walk. And we have that open ditch system that I mentioned earlier. So one of the things that we did, and it's not cheap. So I just, before all the advocates start emailing the chair, do not email the council chair saying Veronica Davis said that we should have porous concrete. It is expensive. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. And we used it in this case because we needed a place to hold water. Houston is a flat city with clay soil. That is everything working against us. So what we ended up doing was taking the stormwater drainage system and then making a sidewalk out of it. So those open ditches are now actually underneath the sidewalk within a design. And we have the concrete sidewalks, the porous sidewalks on top. And so for this whole project, it holds just over 800,000 Starbucks cups of grande coffee and water. And we have video in even pouring rain where it really is able to hold that water. It creates a place where people can now walk. We do have the drainage system, and we had a partnership with the USGS in order to test the water quality. So there's testing ports so that we could actually see not just how the water is moving through the system, but is it also improving the water quality? And so I'll leave you with some things from around the world because why not? Amsterdam is one of my favorite cities. And I know a lot of people talk about Amsterdam as a biking city. Cool story, bro. I actually love it for public transportation. This is a photo that I took while I was there on vacation. And this is their idea of a complete street where they have wide sidewalks. They do have places for bikes. They are able to accommodate people who are driving or who need to park their vehicle. And then you see this streetcar system in the center. One of the things I will tell you about Amsterdam streetcar is to be able to get on a streetcar in the middle of a Tuesday night where the headways were every 5 minutes was really remarkable. I do not speak a lick of Dutch. I can't understand it. I cannot read it, but I was able to navigate around their city without even knowing the language on their public transit. This is, I'm gonna take you to Latin America. This is Cali, Colombia, because a lot of times we show very Eurocentric examples. But this is a photo from Cali, Colombia. It is my favorite city in all of Latin America. And I haven't been everywhere, but it's my favorite so far. And what I love about it is we pat ourselves on the back in the US for having a bus only lane. And here they have bus only streets. And they basically have just taken the existing infrastructure, they've made buses, and the bus stop is also in the street. I wish I would have gotten a photo, but just to the other side of this station is their rendition of transit oriented development. So we always think about buildings and vertical, but just on the other side of that station is actually a whole bunch of vendors, just, with papaya and, clothing and all of that. And they cluster around the stations in order to do business. So it's like you can barely get down the street because of all of the small businesses that are clustered right at that transit stop. And then lastly, for real kind of pie in the sky, if we could only get there. This is Brussels, Belgium. It's actually my favorite city in Europe. And what I loved about it is this is a street and it is only people. And this is the middle of a work day. This isn't even during holiday. This isn't during, some festival or anything like that. This is just a regular day for the people in Belgium. But me and my tourist self were hanging around. And what was amazing was how quiet it was. The ability to sit at a sidewalk cafe and people watch and not have the loudness of vehicles. Also, I will say about Brussels, absolutely fabulous public transit system. I don't speak the language, and I was able to navigate their system. And so this just giving you some provocations for where we could be, where we could go with a little bit of vision and a whole lot of courage. And so with that, I know I will turn it back to Bernard.
So I want to offer up some applause myself for Veronica. That was a really amazing presentation. And Veronica, if you don't mind, could you go back to your slide with Kai? Because I actually felt it was very evocative of what the new front door at their New Carrollton, multimodal, mixed use, raised grant completed, purple rail and metro station connection, because I think that will offer, I think one of the things that the city and the folks that are the builders at New Carrollton are struggling with is how do we define and develop a sense of place? And I think one of the ways that you kind of inspired me is we have lots of parking decks and bus hubs and other nodes where transit's connecting. And there are lots of other parts of the world where people, have night markets and other forms of informal vending that creates lots of opportunity for interesting, diverse, exciting retail to activate and make spaces jump and thrive. And so I loved your idea of finding inspiration from other places, and to actually give ourselves a pat on the back about something. You were highlighting stormwater improvements and permeable pavement. Something that Prince George's has long been a leader on is actually stormwater efforts, and that's in part because of a guy named Adam Ortiz, whose birthday it is, who helped get our stormwater management pilot program going. So lots of folks all over the county can even ask for a limited share, but ask for county tax rebates and grants to help make sure permeable pavement exists on their development projects, not just large development projects, but even if you wanted to change your driveway, that's something that we have stormwater money for too. So not all is lost here. And wanted to say thank you and give everybody a moment to kind of gather themselves after Veronica's talk and see if there were any further thoughts or questions for Veronica or the rest of the panel on the future of transportation in Prince George's.
So I'm just going to say, Veronica, thank you. And glad you've come back to College Park and you've seen, I don't know when you were here originally, but probably a while ago, and things have changed a lot. We've tried to do the right things. We've worked with the State Highway Administration over 20 plus years to get the road to accommodate bikes and put a median in and better crossings and all that. And we've expanded the bike trail system and obviously gotten a lot of redevelopment there. A lot of people walk to campus now rather than driving in from Beltsville or Silver Spring or wherever they used to be. So I don't know, maybe you'll put some pictures in your future
Yeah.
presentations.
And I'm gonna overlook that you called me old. No, I'm just
No,
joking.
I did
No,
not.
no, no.
I don't know when you were here. I don't know
I'm
when
giving
you
you
were
a
here.
hard time. No, I mean, I started at University of Maryland in 1997, so that was under Governor Glendenning.
Yeah,
He was my speaker at graduation.
yeah.
And I remember then as a student, that was the first conversation about the Purple Line, originally going to be a subway through the campus. We talked about, and I remember there was this vision of really restricting vehicles on campus, you know, having the parking garages on the outside. So you drive in and then you move in. So it was, I was actually with a friend who's a civil engineer as well at Maryland. And we were walking around. I'm like, man, these kids don't know how good they have it, right? To see protected bike lanes, to see better crosswalk infrastructure. Route 1 almost looks like a completely different place. If it wasn't for the China buffet, I wouldn't know where I was, right? Like, it has been amazing to see the transformation and amazing to see what will continue to transform, particularly once that beautiful Purple Line is, you know, operational, although the M is gone, but I'm gonna get past that. It's moved, it's relocated. No, but it really is exciting to see the campus, and excited to see what the next generation and how they get to benefit from the lack that we had during my time.
Awesome.
Well, I have a question. We've made a lot of good policies, complete streets policies, and work that actually Councilmember Olson did in his first set of terms. But not a lot of implementation. And so now we have a new master plan for transportation. We have this innovative work on retrofitting on state roads. And so the question is, how do we make this routine so that we look at these policies and we look at these plans, and that's just what gets done? I feel like we're still sort of, apart. And I guess, and Veronica, also your experience, you led a whole agency that had to kind of make those decisions every day. How do we get from nice policies and better guidance to actually every day looking at how we're going to implement slower streets, safer crossings?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. And I will give kudos to some of the things I just heard from Director Hall with the design guidelines. To me, when I got to Houston, I was working under the previous mayor, and his term was up in 3 years. And so we had a very sense of urgency of what can we get done under this mayor to codify these changes so that if we don't make it through the next administration, it's hard to undo that. Nothing can be undone, but it makes it a little bit more onerous to try to undo those changes. And that's when we focused on the design guidelines, because at the end of the day, an engineer is an engineer. And if you put it in the design guidelines, that is what they're going to design. I mean, that is just how it works. And so that's what we focused on, was getting the bike ped transit design guidelines updated, getting the traffic management chapter updated, which includes the city of Houston, even with the new mayor who may have a different vision. We did include in our design guidelines multimodal level of service. So from now on, when you're doing a traffic impact analysis, do not just give us about vehicles. You have to do multimodal level of service. And we went through the processes to get that in place. And so now, while people may have a desire to undo it, they don't have the patience to do it, because it's a process. It's an onerous process. So to get from policy to implementation, that is part of it. Of you have to codify that in design, because once you do that, it makes the kind of external things easier, because any engineer is going to look at your design guidelines and say, okay, this is what we got to do. Fine, this is what we have to do. So to me, that's part of it. I think the other piece of it is back to the picture that I showed, we have to come up with what is, and as you were doing plans, like on corridor plans, don't just focus on what this thing is going to look like when it's a $100 million plan. What can you do for $1 million today just to get something moving? And it may be something as simple as crosswalks. It may be something where you're looking at different mid-block crossings or what have you, using temporary materials, but something that is in the interim. And I think that's some of the things that we started doing as a city, even with our long-term meaty projects. Okay, when this is done and you hand a plan to us, you got to give us the 0 to 2 years. What can we do now, particularly when you say that there's a safety issue? We don't have time to wait. And so one specific example, the City of Houston got a Safe Streets for All grant for one of the most dangerous of dangerous roads within the city. And we got the grant, and there's a planning process. But in the interim, we actually started working on some safety improvements with signs and just little things that we could do to just start the process of making it safer.
I see we have a question from Daniel Pascal.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for that amazing presentation. Also love the book. Yeah, big fan of your work all around. So just excited to be here. And also thank you to the work before Lakisha Hole. The plan is incredible to see. So I'm with the East Coast Greenway Alliance, advocating for a long distance trail from Maine to Florida, and with other trail folks from the Capital Trails Coalition. Also have my colleague Elliot, who's based in DC. I'm based in Philly, so we kind of team up working on trails as sort of the spines of transportation networks, but also access to recreation. I got a chance to see the incredible the Buffalo Bayou Trail System in Houston, which blew my mind. And I was curious about how trails kind of enter into your thoughts on a lot of these conversations when people might have a relationship with a trail as a recreational amenity that doesn't connect or has an unsafe, arterial highway that's surrounding it. How do we leverage the existing trails, the planned trails? There's a ton of amazing ones in Prince George's, of course, the whole Anacostia tributary trail system, the WBNA that just had an incredible new bridge, Central Avenue connector that's coming up. There's so many incredible trails, past, present, and future. Just thinking about how can we tie that in and really like make that an asset to the county and move forward with the complete streets projects, intertwined so it's seamless and connected.
Yeah, so for context, for those that don't know, in Houston, there are several bayous that run generally northwest to southeast through the city to get out to the bay. And with those, we do have trails along them. They are part of our stormwater system. So in extreme weather events, they do flood, and people are very much aware of that. But in addition, City of Houston also has a lot of railroads. And so we have a lot of rails to trails projects through the city. One of the things I will say in some of our newer trails, I don't know, Daniel, if you had a chance to go on the MKT, which is not a fancy artisanal way of saying market, but that is Missouri, Kansas, Texas. And that is a trail that was a railroad. And what I love about that particular trail, if you ever get to Houston, is that there's actually trail-oriented development. So there was warehouses that were along the trail because it was a rail line, and those have been converted. So there's restaurants, there's gyms, there's Pilates and yoga and cafes and all types of restaurant and activities, but they orient towards the trail. So therefore, it feels like the trail is a part of the development, but it's separate. We have another trail that goes through a neighborhood. It's actually one street off of where I used to live, where it's really a wide sidewalk. But that particular street, the houses on that street are worth so much because of this trail, because it is protected, and Halloween, it is all the kids. And so what it has done is it has transformed the thinking of what is a trail, particularly when you orient your development to focus on the trail itself. And so MKT is probably one of the most used trails, even more than the Bayou trails that you saw, Daniel, of they are there. And then they connect. So there's a lot of connectivity, and it's important. And what we were finding, we were working on, is originally what was recreational trails. As we started connecting the network, they became commuter trails, where people realized, oh, I can get to downtown in a trail and a protected facility. And so then for us at the city, it is having to then work on the on-street network to make those last, that kind of, we say first mile, last mile, but that like first block, last block connections to get people to different destinations. if you ever get back to, there's a trail that goes through the middle of Texas Southern University campus. It's the Columbia Tap Trail. And we're still working. There's some challenges with that trail, but it is a beautiful trail that goes through the middle of the campus. And so it's expanding our definition and our idea of what is a trail, and how we orient the city toward accordingly.
Thank you, Daniel, for that question. And thank you so much, Veronica, for sharing that answer. Was wondering if Director Hull might be able to jump in and share a little bit about like how, as the county tries to urbanize more of our not only transit sites, but other like interbeltway communities, how we can think of congestion and parking as not like bad things, but as something to like embrace creatively and like harness to find ways to invest in new micromobility. Because Veronica, you don't know this, but something that was a part of our transit vision plan that was presented on about 2 weeks ago is that in the mid to later stages, depending on funding level, there would be a hope for the county to be able to extend its own call a bus kind of micromobility service in a variety of different zones. Currently, there's one in South County and around like Oxon Hill and National Harbor and like the Friendly area, but there could be like several more in like Bowie, like to help a lot of like Bowie State kids get around and connect in Laurel and other places. And so in any event, I was hoping Director Hull, like given all your experience all over the country, what are some other places throughout the United States that are doing really great things to create more complete and walkable streets, in part by rethinking how we engage with parking and congestion?
Great question. And so the great thing about Prince George's County is that it's very close to a lot of other jurisdictions across the country when you have a lot of different users and agencies maintaining the right of way. Ms. Davis probably can attest in her experience that it is very bifurcated to try to get everyone together, because you have someone dealing with the planning strip, you have someone dealing with the sidewalk, then you have the drainage, then you have all of these different components that make up a right of way. So it's not a one-stop shop. So when you do try to adapt a right of way in a way that's more complete street focused, it takes a lot of great innovation, a lot of patience. And it also allows for you to be able to say, how do we do this in a way that does not create more issues when you have to prioritize one facility over the other? I've been in some places where bike facilities have gotten installed and the next day they had to get removed, right? So how do you start to make sure you're in the right places? The network is connecting. And so I have had the ability to work in some cities. And so because it's being recorded, I will not name the cities because some of them did a good job and some didn't. But in one city that I worked in particular, there were some issues with sidewalks. As a matter of fact, this city was not meeting their ADA requirement. They didn't have great curbs, right? The sidewalks was broken up. So they had to basically say to the city, the federal government said, you have $1 billion of what you got to clear up with your sidewalks. And so could you imagine that's in front of you in addition to you're building up your streetscape as well at the same time. And so when we had that conversation internally, it's like, how do we deal with this holistically? People knew that some of the sidewalks were unsafe, and we still had to create safe areas, especially in communities of color. So that created an opportunity for all the agencies to come together, strategize. And then we also started to figure out, like, what are the materials that we can use that are better? Are there other incentives that the elected officials can look at to help to get these sidewalks built? Where are areas when a development project built, can they put bus shelter there and then build out that sidewalk at the same time? So it was a lot of back and forth, but it was a way for us to roll up our sleeves together, strategize and say what partners can come together to build out this network, because that government agency didn't have the money to pay for it out of pocket, but they were like, with all us doing this together, it's going to help us. In regards to micromobility, a lot of actually these transportation network companies want to be used. One city that I will name that was very innovative is the city of Los Angeles was able to use their bus pass and connect with one of the transportation network companies. And so if you were dealing from a transportation equity standpoint, you weren't able to have a credit card, but you had a bus pass. And so you're able to put money however you needed to on that bus pass to use rideshare, to the bus system itself. And that metro agency was able to do something that I was very impressed. So if you're not able to get to that last mile from a bus standpoint, you were able to use a transportation network company to finish your last mile trip. So I thought that was pretty awesome. And that's something that I'm hoping that we can do more here locally.
Thank you so much, Director Hull. I really appreciate that additional context. Just wanted to see, does anybody else have any final questions, comments, thoughts, something that you maybe wanted to share? And Dan, just feel free to like speak up. Dan Barron, one of our steering committee members, who had been on us to bring Veronica O Davis to speak to Rise Prince George's. Dan, kind of jump in and join the conversation.
Thanks, Bernard. Yeah, I forgot I could unmute myself. I just had maybe a broad question, but do you have any recommendations or strategies on how to encourage more community members to engage with long-term plans like Go Prince George's? It seems like there's a lot going on right now that's reason to be optimistic. A lot of shifts of policy at the state and county level. But talking with folks, I think they sometimes get disillusioned about how long all of this takes, and might be years before we start to see some of the benefits of these policy shifts and projects. So just any general suggestions? I know this is an ongoing, probably an issue you all tackle regularly, just how to engage the community on these plans.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I mean, I'll say a few things about it. I mean, yes, a lot of this stuff takes a long time. I mean, getting US 1 in College Park to be redone was, I mean, I was elected to the city council in College Park in 1997, Veronica, and it just got completed, this year. And we've been advocating for it for that long, and the Purple Line, same thing. But I would say that there's a lot of small, and Veronica mentioned this, there's a lot of smaller things that can be done in the interim, right? So we can have the long-term vision, the bigger plans, the Go Prince George's, and other things, but we can also get some smaller pieces. So like I'm working on, and I know, Dan, you've been involved in this, and Daniel has as well, trying to get a bikeway connection between the WBNA, which is over, goes as far as Lanham, to come across through New Carrollton, Lanham, New Carrollton, the greater Riverdale area, and over to College Park, and then over to the, so the Northeast Branch Trail, the Trolley Trail, the Northwest Branch Trail, connecting all those north-south routes with an east-west connection. And we're not going to get that done, I mean, the Trolley Trail took me my full 8 years plus another 4 or 5 years after I was out of office last time. But we can get pieces of it done that are key pieces and key connections across intersections. I mean, we have some horrible intersections that we need to make better, and we're working with State Highway Administration on that, with DPWT, with park and planning and whatnot. But we need your advocacy. I mean, yes, we can get discouraged, but I think the more success that we have, and the more things we can point to that actually are getting done, I think that is cause for optimism. And so thank you, and thank you for all your advocacy.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first step, and I think Director Hall said it, is you have to have the plan, right? Because that opens up the door that things will happen, and someone might be selling a building. You're like, oh my God, we got to buy this building because we need this critical, that was the piece that we needed. And so it starts by having a plan and a vision. I think the other thing is we also can't forget to meet people's basic needs today. Because what I found is it's hard for people to even think about 30 years from now when they've been asking for a stop sign for the last decade and they still don't have their stop sign, right? And so you're like, no, but I get it, the stop sign. And so I think some of it too, it's as we approach this work and as we work in different communities, what do they need right now that we haven't addressed? What has they sent to 311 or their council member or whomever that hasn't been addressed? And I think that's where people get discouraged when they've been fighting for something for 10 years that is so small and insignificant and probably cost $1,000 when you're coming to talk about a longer range plan.
And then I'll chime in as well. I think also it's a great way to also start to advocate more and do more pop-ups. And so we had Love My Largo recently, where we shut down several travel lanes and let people feel more comfortable walking in the streets, right? So how do we start to get even people behavior patterns changing, even though we're very suburban here in Prince George's County? How do we start really showing multimodal is actually the way to go, so we can get more single occupancy vehicles off the street? I know some people are very familiar with Ciclavia. Well, LA had their version of what Columbia introduced, but how do we even start to celebrate moments where we're like, we're getting out of our cars? And how do we start having more festivals that embrace this idea? And so the more that we do that, then the engineering component will be something that we can be able to explore safely and say, how do we start to minimize some of the areas that are over-designed? Because we have some travel lanes that are really big, but we have to start testing these out kind of in a tactical urbanism standpoint that can start to effectuate policies and plans getting updated faster.
Thank you so much, Director Hall. That was like an amazing note to end on, because that was going to be one of my 3 takeaways for people to like leave today doing. One, like think of a place in Prince George's that you think would benefit from a pedestrian plaza, like maybe on a weekend, maybe for a holiday or a special event, or maybe just all the time. I actually have an unexpected one in South County, right off Marlboro Pike. I think it could be the anchor for the Marlboro Pike partnership. But beyond that, I'd say like one, think of an example of a place that we could reclaim for people and not cars and make it more useful for everyone in the process. Secondly, I want everybody to keep their eyes peeled, both emails from us and emails from the planning department about how the master plan of transportation moves through the planning board and county council review and approval and significant amendment process. And so we need all of you all to show up and join us both virtually and in person to advocate for those things. And last but not least, Cheryl would totally would totally read me the right act if I did not remind people of our last conversation that Kyle Reeder led along with staff from DPWT around Prince George's transit visit plan that was completed during the late stages of the Alsobrooks administration, but is now ready and teed up to begin to get implemented right now. And one of the things I'd really love for people to do is take some time, like we'll have like a link to it in the chat and we'll send it as a follow-up. Take some time to look at least the website for the transit vision plan and then go on and give them some feedback. I literally was in a Facebook group where there's nothing but people that complain all the time. And people were saying something really positive about the brand wrap and how the buses look different and they look purposeful and it looks more than just a bus. And so I just wanted to offer on that like end note of light and levity and hope, because as much as there's craziness going on in the world today, there's a lot of good things to look forward to. And that's in part thanks to you and all the future advocacy work you're going to do. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, well, that's right. I actually wanted to note, Carm was about to speak. Carm, I just want to give some props to State Highway Administration on the kind of retrofitting you're doing. You're doing fast project implementation for pedestrian safety. And so I really want to recognize that that you guys have really sped that up. It's not a 5-year project. It's like an 18-month time horizon, things like that, right?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that, Cheryl. I want to be cognizant of time, so I'll take the last minute and try to tie this all up really neatly with a bow. But speaking to some of the kind of faster work that we're doing, the State Highway Administration and SHA District 3, we're trying to get better at celebrating, to Councilmember Olson's point, the smaller wins, right? So all through last year, we went through and upgraded, like I think it was something around like 300 crosswalks. So we took them from what they were to continental high-vis crosswalks, so that that way they're more conspicuous for folks who were crossing. And just things like that that may seem small, right? Like one day the striping looked kind of faded, the next it looked brighter. But those small things make it easier for both motorists to see and tell, oh, there is somebody in this crosswalk. They're trying to cross this state roadway. Let me stop my vehicle. Let me slow down. So slower things like that that kind of happen in the interim is like shorter term improvements. And then you can consider the PSAP as like maybe midterm improvements so you can deliver a little bit more quickly. And then as more projects kind of come through development under the Complete Streets policy, you'll start to kind of see this transformation if we take the time to train and then we take the time to transform. So thank you all for that.
Can I say one very quick thing? In this budget, it was a very tough budget year, but one thing that the council, but I was, pushing was more funding for bus shelters, because a lot of places in the county just has a post in the ground. We were able to get we were able to increase it from 45 new bus shelters in the county to 70, which, it's still, not where it should be, but these are the small things that can make a real difference in people's lives, right? So if you have a place where you are like, this place really needs a bus shelter, like contact your council member and advocate for that, because we added more to the budget this year. DPWT obviously has to go out and assess it and all that stuff, but those are small but important things.
Yes, sir. And thank you so much, Councilmember Olson, Carm, and Veronica O. Davis, in addition to Director Hull. Veronica, I'm so glad to have you back here in College Park. Hope it's not temporary. I hope you'll be very much a part of making this change happen, because I think there's lots that we want to do for our transportation future that is very achievable and is very winnable. And thank you for bringing that all to life. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.